The Industrial Revolution did not arrive as a single invention or a sudden explosion of progress. It emerged slowly, almost quietly at first, from the pressures and contradictions of 18th century Europe. For generations, economic life had been rooted in land, seasons, and muscle. Most people worked where they were born, producing goods by hand for local use under systems that had changed little for centuries. Yet beneath this apparent stability, forces were building, forces that would eventually tear this world apart and remake it on entirely new terms. By the early 1700s, Europe was experiencing steady population growth, fewer plagues, improved agriculture, relative political stability. More people were surviving into adulthood. This growing population created demand, more food, more clothing, more fuel, more goods of every kind. Traditional systems of production, small workshops, household labor, struggled to keep up. What had once been sufficient now felt slow, limited, and inefficient. Scarcity was no longer caused only by nature, but by the limits of human labor itself. At the same time, global trade was expanding at an unprecedented scale. European empires drew raw materials from across Asia, Africa, and the Americas: cotton, sugar, tobacco, metals. Wealth accumulated unevenly. It concentrated in merchants, financiers, and landowners who were increasingly willing to invest, not just in land, but in new methods of production. Capital, once tied to agriculture and trade, began seeking higher returns through innovation. Agriculture itself was changing. In Britain especially, new farming techniques improved yields and reduced the need for labor. Enclosure laws transformed shared village lands into private property. Many rural workers were pushed off the land entirely. These families did not disappear. They became a growing pool of laborers with no land, no tools, and few options. Survival now depended on selling labor for wages. A centuries-old link between work, land, and community quietly broke. Technology provided the spark. In textile production, simple machines multiplied output. Spinning and weaving, once slow and manual, accelerated through mechanical power. Water wheels and later steam engines freed production from weather and daylight. Energy itself was reorganized, from muscle and wood to fossil fuels buried deep underground. The steam engine, refined rather than invented, became the symbol of a new age. Heat became motion, motion became power. Factories no longer depended on rivers, they could exist almost anywhere. Power became portable, controllable, scalable. Cities grew, time changed, life reorganized itself around machines. Workdays no longer shaped by sun or seasons, but by engines demanding constant operation. Factories transformed labor. Skilled artisans lost control. Many were replaced, others reduced to machine tenders. Tasks were broken down, repetitive, simple. Women and children were hired at lower wages. Output increased, costs fell. For workers, hours grew longer, conditions more dangerous, control disappeared. Productivity soared, and so did inequality. Cities expanded rapidly. Workers poured in from the countryside. Housing crowded, sanitation failed, disease spread easily. Entire neighborhoods revolved around factories, bells, whistles, shifts. The rhythms of nature were replaced. Urban life promised opportunity, but often delivered exhaustion. A new social order emerged, an industrial bourgeoisie, defined not by birth, but by ownership. At the other end, the industrial working class expanded rapidly. They powered the economy, yet remained excluded from its rewards. Families changed.
Work left the home. Children entered factories. Women's labor was essential, yet undervalued. Childhood itself began to disappear under industrial demand. Markets went global. Factories needed raw materials and distant consumers. Cotton from enslaved labor fed European mills. Finished goods flooded foreign markets. Local industries collapsed. Industrial growth in Europe was inseparable from exploitation elsewhere. Time became discipline. Clocks ruled daily life. Lateness became moral failure. Efficiency turned into belief. Growth into obligation. Resistance followed. Workers protested. Machines were blamed. Movements formed. They were met with repression. Suffering was justified as temporary, yet prosperity remained distant. Industrialization created immense wealth and unprecedented capability. Goods became affordable. Transport accelerated. Knowledge spread. But gains were uneven. Class, geography, power. Progress itself was redefined. Innovation became virtue. Tradition became obstacle. Nature became resource. By the late 18th century, the old world still existed, but it no longer ruled. A new system had proven its power. The Industrial Revolution was not just growth, it reordered human life. It created prosperity and embedded inequality, expanded capability while narrowing choices. And once set in motion, it could not be reversed, along lines of class, geography, and power. The Industrial Revolution also transformed how societies understood progress. Innovation became a moral good, disruption a sign of advancement. Traditions that slowed production were cast as obstacles to be removed. Nature itself was reimagined as a resource to be extracted, measured, and controlled. The relationship between humans and the environment shifted toward domination, setting patterns that would define centuries to come. By the end of the 18th century, the old world was not disappeared, but it was no longer dominant. The industrial system had proven its power, reshaping economies, societies, and expectations. What began as a response to population pressure and market demand had become a new organizing principle for civilization. Work, wealth, time, and power were now structured around machines and the systems that fed them. The Industrial Revolution was not simply a story of invention or growth. It was a fundamental reordering of human life, carried forward by ambition, necessity, and unequal power. It created modern prosperity while embedding modern inequality. It expanded human capability while narrowing the choices of millions. And once set in motion, it could not be reversed, only extended, adapted, and contested. The world that followed would be built on its foundations, shaped by both its achievements and its unresolved consequences.